Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and hi everyone, my name is NURUL NABILAH BINTI Muhammad Isa. My metric number is 280905 and I am the first presenter in this group. So for my part, I will explain about definition of activity-based costing and traditional costing.
Activity-based costing ABC.
So, what is activity-based costing, or we call it as ABC? It is a costing method that assigns overhead and indirect costs to related products and services. This accounting method of costing recognizes the relationship between costs, overhead activities and manufactured product, assigning indirect costs to product less arbitrarily. However, some indirect costs, such as management and office staff salary, are difficult to assign to a product. And how activity-based costing, or we call it ABC, works. ABC is mostly used in the manufacturing industry since it enhances the reliability of cost data, hence producing nearly to cost and better classifying the cost incurred by company during its production process. For more information, ABC is used to get a better grasp on costs, allowing companies to form a more appropriate pricing strategy. This costing system also is used in target costing, product line profitability analysis, customer profitability analysis, and service pricing.
Traditional costing.
So what is a traditional costing? Traditional costing is an accounting method used to determine the cost of making product to make a profit, and it is based on allocating overhead or indirect manufacturing costs. This system relies on calculating predetermined overhead rates and applying the rate to a given metric. And for more information, traditional costing system use estimate overhead rate for a specific cost driver. A cost driver is an element of the manufacturing process that may incur costs, such as managerial expenses, packaging, machine hour, machine setup, quantity of material required, cleaning, and also maintenance.
Hi, my name is ASHRAFF bin SAIDAN, metric number 277477. I will present about the differences between traditional costing versus activity-based costing in decision-making, costing system, and information. First of all, in decision-making, in order for companies to make a good decision, they must require accurate information about the product cost without sufficient allocation of indirect costs. It would be difficult for the companies to differentiate the gain or loss in making their product or services. In activity-based costing giving the exact information of the cost price because they are able to measure the real resource used by the daily activities, that giving the information to the companies. The companies use the information to make a good decision, and the basis use of this costing is related to each of products, and therefore there is an important factor to the company to analyze the profitability of products. Moving on to traditional costing. To calculate overhead rate, they use direct labor hours, direct labor costs, or machine hours as their basis, and therefore, the basis is difficult for company to get exact information about the cost price. Because of it, does not give the exact information about the cost price to the company. This will lead to the decision makers to commit mistake in their decisions. It also does not consider special features of each service in distributing the costs. The allocate costs and the cost price will consider wrongly, and therefore it is thus not giving an exact information about the cost price. Traditional costing only consider direct cost in calculating the cost price, while indirect cost is not play any role in calculating the cost price. Moving on to my next point, which is costing system. In activity-based costing, it is expensive to implement and maintain this method because they must find estimating resource needed of a charge appropriation rate, and they use many of cost driver. This is the reason why this activity-based costing expensive rather than traditional costing. Meanwhile, for traditional costing, it is less expensive to implement and maintain this method because this costing is not use many cost driver. They only use basis of machine hours, direct labor hours, and direct labor costs. Next, in terms of information disclosure, activity-based costing provide inside info starting places of cost and the probable outcome of different decisions by the process manager. The reporting methodology is more accurate and help managers become more aware of original parameters that created demand on indirect and keep up resources that can identify and remove value-adding activities. Besides, this information emerged as tremendously useful guide to management action that translated directly into higher profits. Meanwhile, for traditional costing, did not focus on why or where the costs occur, but only provide little insight into the causes of variance. Besides, traditional costing did not provide non-financial information such as defect rate in each activity since it beyond the capacity of these methods. The reporting methodology under this method was less accurate and often not timely, which make it hard for the operational manager to understand since it's very analytical and does not related to the cost of product or services applied. That's all from me. Thank you. I will pass to the next presenter.
Assalamualaikum and hi, my name is Dayana binti MOHAMAD NAZIR, matric number 280792. I will explain about differences in cost pools, cost allocation, and calculation step between traditional costing and activity-based costing. Cost pools, article traditional costing versus activity-based costing from Dr. Joyce L. Wang. First, about traditional costing under cost pools. Traditional costing uses cost centers as cost pools and allocates indirect costs to a cost object through those cost centers. In this figure, indirect costs are first assigned to cost centers. Here, cost centers include service departments which provide internal services to other two departments and production departments which directly participate in the production process. The costs accumulated in service departments are then reallocated to production departments using the direct method, step-down method, or reciprocal method. By this time, the indirect costs accumulated in production departments include the department's own indirect costs and any indirect costs received from service departments. These indirect costs are then allocated to products by using the allocation rate, which also called absorption rate. Next, I will explain about activity-based costing. Under activity-based costing, cost centers are not used as cost pools to allocate indirect costs. Instead, activities are used as cost pools. Indirect costs are first accumulated in activity cost pools and then allocated to products using activity cost driver rates according to the product's requirements for different activities. The choice of cost pools under ABC is more reasonable because companies consume resources as a result of conducting activities instead of having cost centers. For example, consider a company that claims to have a production department but does not conduct any production activities. Under traditional costing, it does not actually incur costs. However, the company will incur costs when the production department conducts production activities such as handling materials, setting up machines, running those machines, and doing quality control. Cost allocation. Article comparative study of traditional and activity-based costing involving companies of Iran Tractor from Dr. Muhammad Haddadi and Mir Syed Nezhat. Traditional costing only using the single overhead pool which lead to the certain amount of estimation in allocation. The cost allocation based on direct labor hours or machine hours. So it is hard to reveal the actual cost and effective relationship between indirect cost and individual performance. Meanwhile, activity-based costing ABC using multiple activity cost pools which every activity have its own cost driver. Overhead costs under this method can be allocated straight to the products, and the allocation of the overhead costs and cost products is more precise. Disable activity-based costing method to find better estimation cost compared to the traditional costing. Calculation step. Article from activity-based costing method from Lumen. In traditional costing method, we calculate one plan-wide allocation rate, or we could calculate an overhead allocation rate for each department. Traditional costing method have 4 steps. Step 1. Identify allocating overhead or indirect costs. Determine the basis for allocating overhead or indirect costs. This can be anything a company decides, but most common are direct labor costs, direct labor hours, direct material usage, or machine hours. Step 2. Choose a cost driver. We should choose a cost driver that has been used, either direct labor cost, direct labor hours, direct material usage, or machine hours. Step 3. Calculate predetermined overhead rate (POHR) using estimates. This is typically calculated at the end of the year to be used during the following year. The formula we use for this is predetermined overhead rate (POHR) equal to estimated overhead divided by estimated base or cost driver. Step 4. Apply overhead using predetermined overhead rate (POHR). Apply overhead throughout the period using the actual amount of our base and the predetermined overhead rate (POHR) calculated in step 3. We calculate this as apply overhead equal to actual amount of base multiplied with POHR. Next, activity-based costing ABC have 5 steps. Step 1. Identify indirect activity pools. Step 2. Identify a cost driver. Identify the cost driver associated with each activity. A cost driver is an activity or transaction that causes cost to be incurred. For the purchasing materials activity, the cost drivers could be the number of orders placed or the number of items ordered. Each activity could have multiple cost drivers. Step 3. Compute activity cost rate or cost driver. Activity rates equal to overhead cost for the activity divided by the total activity driver incurred. Step 4. Identify cost driver unit each product. And the last step, step 5, assign cost to products. Assign cost to products by multiplying the cost driver rates times the volume of cost driver units consumed by the product.
Assalamualaikum, my name is Muhammad AMIRUL bin Muhammad Noor and my metric number is 280831. For this topic, I will present about the article that I have studied. That is why activity-based costing is still tagging behind the traditional costing in Malaysia by Dayana Rasyah. In this article state, generally costing system is information system. To be useful, costing system require a specific set of data such as direct labor hour and unit produced. Because the same input data could be handled in different way, the result obtained will be depend on the costing system used. that is between activity-based costing and traditional costing. Activity-based costing is a costing method that assigns overhead and indirect costs to related product and service. This accounting method of costing recognizes the relationship between cost, overhead activity, and manufacturing product. Traditional costing is the allocation of factory overhead to product based on the volume of production resources consumed. Under this method, overhead is usually applied based on either the amount of direct labor hour consumed or machine hour used. We can look at the implementation, cost drivers, performance measurement, and direct and indirect costs of the two costing approach based on the article to compare activity-based costing with traditional costing. The first distinction we notice between activity-based costing and traditional costing is in terms of implementation. The activity-based costing implementation is as follows. The first step is to identify and classify activities. The next step is to calculate the total cost of the activity. The third step is to calculate the cost drive rate, and the fourth is to use the cost drive to calculate activity cost. Meanwhile, there are 6 steps to traditional costing implementation. The first of which is the identification of indirect costs, and the second of which is the calculation of indirect costs. The third step is to choose a cost-cutting strategy. The cost drive estimate value is the fourth. The fifth step is to calculate the overhead rate, and the last step is to apply the overhead rate. Rather than implementing activity-based costing and traditional costing, we can say that activity-based costing is based on the actual performance, consumption, and expense data extracted from the organization's existing information system, and combined with the knowledge of those directly involved in the distribution of goods and services. The cost is assigned to activity based on the processing resources they consume. When it comes to traditional costing, cost allocation involves some guesswork. The cost system do not pay attention to why or where costs occur. The second difference is cost drive. Because activity-based costing provides improved visibility into company development and their cost drive, manager will be able to eliminate expense associated with non-value added activity and develop the efficiency of current development information. The next difference is at performance measurement. Activity-based costing indicate that the information on cost drive and cost drive rate illustrate that there are potential powerful effects on the dean of staff, and they are used as performance determinant. Cost drive provide volume determinant on a different kind of operational performance, which reflect the effective and accuracy of the activity concerned. The last is at direct and indirect cost. For traditional costing system, we used to assign expense to product and service based on factors such as direct labor and machine hour. The base are linked to actions that are indirect and ongoing. Activity-based costing separates indirect and maintenance expense into activities and then allocates to expense based on the drivers of these activities. This is why activity-based costing gives plant manager a more systematic way to access to the cost of various operations required to maintain a product. For calculation, activity-based costing provide more accurate information on the activity and interaction that impact product price, while traditional costing approach, which are based on assumption of long production runs of a typical product with a static specification. This is because activity-based costing in manufacturing content characterized by smaller lot size, high white mix, and frequent changeovers. Furthermore, traditional costing system only display financial data, while non-financial data like as defect rates and throughput rates in each activity are beyond the scope of traditional costing system. This article has mentioned with a minimum quantity of detail and a cost estimate figure. Activity-based costing will function well. This means that enterprise in Malaysia that want to change a cost system from a traditional system to activity-based costing must hire a designer to create a more precise measurement instrument if a more precise cost is needed.
Assalamualaikum and hi, my name is AINA SYAZWANI binti Muhammad SAINI, metric number 280735. My presentation is based on an article, Skylar Inc. Traditional Cost System versus Activity-Based Cost System, a managerial accounting case study by Huang 2018. This case is about a fictitious office workstation manufacturing company named Skylar Inc. and their implementation of traditional cost system and the activity-based cost system when allocated product cost. The case focuses on the application of activity-based costing and highlights the differences between both costing. Based on this case study, we found that in allocating cost to products, the traditional cost system follows a simple framework. Direct product costs such as material and labor costs are traced directly to products, while indirect overhead costs are allocated to product based on a firm-wide overhead rate or multiple departmental overhead rate. The implementation of traditional cost system is straightforward, which causes the cost allocation far from precise. To address the shortcomings of the traditional cost system, activity-based costing was introduced in allocating costs to products. The activity-based cost system follows a complex framework, which it has two-stage process. The first stage is manufacturing and non-manufacturing overhead costs are assigned to activity cost pools, and the second stage is allocation starts with the calculation of activity rates by dividing the total cost of each activity pool by the activity output. Furthermore, the cost allocation is more accurate when implement the activity-based cost system. So technically, there are some differences between these two costing systems. The first difference is the step of the implementation. Traditional costing system is more simplistic but less accurate than the activity-based costing system that is more complex but more accurate. A study had found that traditional costing system comes out with one single cost driver yields distorted cost allocation. The implementation of activity-based costing system is able to account for the resource consumption by each part. Also, a study found that some products were overpriced and others were underpriced when comparing both costing methods. They also conclude that the implementation of the activity-based costing was not beneficial due to the high cost of implementation. In conceptual, the traditional cost system allocates all manufacturing overhead costs to products, even those costs are not caused by the product manufacturing process. For example, the salaries of a facility cleaning crew and security guards are allocated to products only because they are incurred at the manufacturing facilities. In comparison, activity-based cost system includes manufacturing overhead costs only if they are caused by product-related activities. Because of the cleaning crew and security guard perform activities relating to the general maintenance of the facilities, their salaries are viewed as organization sustaining costs and excluded from the product costs. Next, the traditional cost system excludes all non-manufacturing costs, which is those incurred outside of the manufacturing facilities, from product costs, even though some of these non-manufacturing costs are presumably caused by products. For example, the cost of office supplies and office equipment depreciation are reported as period expense under the traditional cost system. However, in the case of Skylar Inc., a portion of this cost is consumed by product-related order processing activities. Thus, activity-based costing includes this type of non-manufacturing costs in product costs. For Skylar Inc., non-manufacturing costs related to order processing and post-sale support activities are allocated to the overhead costs of products. In this case study, there are three conceptual differences between the traditional cost system and activity-based cost system, which is the first one is manufacturing overhead costs caused by customer and organization level activities. the manufacturing overhead costs are excluded from product cost in activity-based costing, and it will result in lower product cost compared to the traditional cost system. Secondly, the non-manufacturing overhead costs caused by product-related order processing and post-sales support activities are added to product costs in activity-based costing, which results in higher product costs compared to the traditional cost system. Thirdly, direct costs such as shipping and sales commissions are also added to product costs in activity-based costing, which results in higher product costs compared to the traditional cost system. The aggregate effect of these three differences between the traditional cost system and activity-based cost system results in higher product costs, thus lower product margins for both the standard and customized models.